Okay, I cut my fabric at 8.5 by 16.
If it's a little short on the length, that's okay.
Action.
Okay, so now I'm going to just iron a little lip. I call this the lip. You can call it a fold over or whatever. I take my template. I pull the main down and then I shift this up until the gap is maybe a 1/4 inch from the top. The lip is a 1/4 inch from the top, and I press it. Okay, and then I have it ready to go. As you see, I have a whole pile of the 8.5 by 16 pieces of fabric folded and ready to be sewn. And I like to do them assembly lines, so I have a big pile. These triangles are the tails, I call them. And I have made you a template like this to go in your kit. So I cut them a smidge over just because. And the point is not important. It's actually better if you have a little bit of the tip cut off. So my tails are basically pieces that are not going to be big enough to use for the regular front part of the mask. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to match it up. Now, you don't have to be that precious. Some people just don't care and use whatever you've got because this is more about safety than it is about looks, but some people are vain. So I'm going to match this with this. Okay, so I zip through here. Cut the threads. Put it back in its folded position. And again, I'm not going to be precious about gathering, but all I'm going to do is just get my threads straight, and I'm going to just shove these into the machine with my hands. As you can see, I'm doing sort of a, we'll call that a lowbrow gather. And oops, nicked it. Do the same thing on the other side. We want these to be gathered to about 2.5 inches wide. 2 inches is okay too. And if I feel like it's not exactly 2.5 inches, I might go over it here just to cram it together a little better. So then I come over, cut off all my loose threads briefly, quickly. Everything's about efficiency when you're doing this mass production. There are millions of people in the world that need protective masks. So I look over at my little deal, and that's just about right on the width. It's just about right on the width. Okay.
Okay, so after I sewed the mask portion with the lip and the gathering, I just do a bunch of those before I sew on the tails. So this is a pile of about 40 of them, and it took me about 1 hour and 10 minutes, so that's about 2 minutes a piece.
Okay, so now I'm taking my tail and I'm putting the open pocket side, because this is the pocket for my coffee filter or paper towel. So I'm putting that side up and the right side of the tail behind it. And I'm going to sew this in the middle-ish of the tail. And I have a bit of a bigger seam allowance here, so I'm going to let that overhang. And again, this is all rough and tumble. Okay, now here's a geometry issue. Because I cut this straight, I'm going to pull this, make sure it's very tight up against the main portion of the mask. And I'm going to pull it so that there's a little bit of a hangover, and that's going to help you in the pressing of the tail later. So just trust me on this, but make sure that it's tight up against this, otherwise you get this weird buckle at the end. So we're going to pull this, and always your bottom one you're going to fold over so you've got a nice edge. Then you're going to do the same with that one, and again you're going to have the angle overhanging the top, and you just have to kind of squish in the mask to get it nice and tight. Okay, so see mine are there, and then I'm going to run them through. And I back up all the way. I cut this off just to get rid of some of that bulk. And ta-da! There you go. Doesn't matter if your seams show. Again, don't be so precious. And we clip the threads.
Action.
Okay, so now I have both my tails, and I showed you how to pull them apart. I'm going to come back over to my iron, and I'm going to press this open, and I'm going to just make sure that the lower portion of the tail, you know all about keeping this from raveling. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to cut off the tip a little bit to these because the tip is just for ease of cutting in pre-production. So I do this, and then I just roll this over, again not being too precious, but what I've done is I've made this a nice closure. It gets a little hotter at the end. Don't burn your fingers, I do that all the time. And then I'm going to run these through with the seam in just a moment after I press them, but I just tidy these up like so. And because I've cut these on a partial bias, they could be a direct bias, but what I've done is I've used at least a partial bias to get a little bit of pull, stretch in the tie part, because heads vary in size. Some of us have fatter heads than others. So I wanted at least a little bit of bias, and because of that, it's going to cause it to do a little bit of winding, but you just have to, you know, strong arm it when you get to the iron, okay?
Okay, so just like I did with the mask portion, after I've sewn all the tails on, I make a big pile of those. Then I come back and press them like I showed you earlier before I sew up the sides.
Okay, so now I'm just going to zip up the tail here. And again, not precious. Doesn't even have to be straight, just get it down. Now normally if I were doing my custom aprons, I would be doing these in colors of thread that line up with the fabric, but because this is just a fast and dirty kind of high volume production, I'm just using white. Sometimes if I run out of white, I might use black. And then I just cut off the tail like that. So then I go back here, I cut the threads, because you know I hate lingering threads. And now you have your mask that you tie around the head with the pocket for the coffee filter or paper towel. Now, I have been inserting a coffee filter to the ones that I deliver, but if I were you, I wouldn't bother. If you do go to the trouble to insert a coffee filter, if you happen to have them around, most people, well, some people do. We went out and bought them. But paper towels are, I guess, sort of short supply, so, but those might work just as well. They say that it picks up some of the particulates in our germs. But what I do is I take it, I iron it, I fold it in half, and then I just slightly cut these little ends here to give it a straight edge. Again, nothing precious, just cut it. Then I take the mask and I insert the coffee filter. Now, when I send mine out, and then you can hear it crunch, the coffee filter should be replaced every time it's used. But I have made up this little document with the particulars that I give to people, and I will attach this document to an email for you so that you can cut it yourself and you can change that to Karen.
Okay, so here is a view of the last batch. There are 40 of them in this group, and they probably took me about 5 hours complete because of the pressing and the cutting. But this is the third batch I've made, and we'll continue to make them until people stop asking for them. Okay, good luck with your project.